The blade pressed against her throat, cold as the Seoul winter wind that howled outside the abandoned warehouse. 12 men surrounded her, their faces carved from stone, their eyes empty of mercy. Adaeze Okonkwo had survived the slums of Lagos, had buried her mother with her own hands, had crossed oceans with nothing but a dream and $17 sewn into her bra. But tonight, in this frozen corner of South Korea, she was certain her story would end in blood. The man they called the Serpent stepped forward, his leather shoes clicking against concrete stained with memories of previous visitors who never left. He was beautiful in the way destruction is beautiful, in the way a storm rolling across the horizon makes you forget it will destroy everything you love. Kang Seojun. The name alone made grown men weep, made police commissioners look the other way, made the entire Gangnam underworld bow in reverence and terror. He raised his hand, and the blade pulled back from her skin. Not away. Just enough for her to breathe. Just enough for hope to flicker before he extinguished it. Do you know why you're here? His voice was silk wrapped around broken glass. Adaeze's chest heaved. Her Ankara dress, the one her grandmother had given her before she died, was torn at the shoulder. Blood trickled from a cut above her eyebrow where they had struck her during the abduction. But her eyes, those dark pools that held centuries of ancestral strength, refused to break. Because your men are cowards who kidnap women from bus stops, she spat. The room tensed. One of the guards stepped forward, fist raised, but Seojun's hand stopped him without a glance. You have fire, he said, circling her like a predator deciding which bone to break first. Good. You will need it. What do you want from me? He stopped directly in front of her, close enough that she could smell the subtle notes of sandalwood and something darker, something dangerous. His eyes searched her face as if looking for something he had lost long ago. 3 weeks ago, he said slowly, you touched me. On the subway. Line 2, Gangnam Station. 8:47 in the morning. You remember. Adaeze's blood ran cold. The memory flooded back. The overcrowded train. The sudden stop. Bodies pressed together like sardines. Her hand flying out to grab something, anything, to stop herself from falling. And finding him. She had apologized profusely, her face burning with embarrassment, her Korean failing her in her panic. He had said nothing. Just stared at her with those unreadable eyes while the train carried them through the underground arteries of Seoul. She had gotten off at the next stop, practically running, convinced she would never see him again. She was wrong. It was an accident, she whispered. The train stopped suddenly. I lost my balance. Seojun leaned in, his lips brushing against her ear, and what he said next made her question everything she thought she knew about this moment, about this man, about the universe itself. Do it again. Before you continue this journey, before you discover why a man who commands armies and controls empires would hunt down a woman across a city of millions for a single accidental touch, I need you to do something. Drop a comment right now telling me where in the world you are watching this story unfold. Are you in your bed at midnight? On your lunch break? Riding a bus through streets that could be anywhere? Tell me where you are. And while you are at it, hit that subscribe button. This story is about to take you places you never expected to go, and I would hate for you to miss what happens next. Adaeze Okonkwo was not supposed to be in Seoul. She was supposed to be dead. 3 years ago, she had been a promising medical student at the University of Lagos, 1 semester away from achieving a dream that had sustained her through poverty, through hunger, through the death of everyone who had ever loved her. Her mother had worked 3 jobs to keep Adaeze in school, cleaning houses for wealthy families who looked through her like she was invisible, selling vegetables at the market until her hands bled, sewing clothes by candlelight until her eyes gave up their strength. "You will be a doctor," her mother had said on her deathbed, cancer eating her from the inside because they could not afford treatment. "You will heal people. You will be everything I never got to be." Adaeze had held her mother's hand until it grew cold, had screamed until her voice abandoned her, had sworn on her mother's grave that she would become everything she had promised. And she had been so close. So impossibly close. Then the letter came. "Due to outstanding tuition fees, your enrollment has been terminated. 300,000 naira. That was all that stood between her and her destiny. Approximately $700. In a world where billionaires spent more on a single dinner, she lost everything for $700. She tried to fight. She went to the administrative office, begged, pleaded, offered to work, to clean, to do anything. They looked at her the way the wealthy families had looked at her mother. Like she was invisible. Like she was already gone. In her desperation, she made a decision that would change everything. She borrowed money from a man named Chief Obiora, a businessman whose legitimate enterprises were a thin veneer over operations that made men disappear. He gave her the money with a smile and a contract she did not read carefully enough. The interest was impossible. The repayment terms were designed to fail. And when she could not pay, Chief Obiora came to collect in a different currency. "You will work for me," he said, his bodyguards blocking every exit. "In my entertainment establishments. Until your debt is cleared." Adaeze understood what he meant. She understood that once she entered that world, she would never leave it. She would become a ghost, a body without a soul, a number in ledger books kept by men who traded in human despair. So she ran. She sold everything she owned, including the gold necklace her mother had worn on her wedding day, the only thing of value she had left. She found a woman who knew a man who knew someone who could get her documents, a passport, a visa to somewhere, anywhere. South Korea was taking workers. The factories needed hands. It was far enough that Chief Obiora's reach might not extend. It was a chance. She arrived in Seoul in January, during a winter that felt like the earth itself was trying to kill her. She had no winter clothes, no friends, no family, nothing but $17 and a determination that had been forged in fires that would have broken anyone else. The first month was a kind of hell she had not known existed. She slept in a jjimjilbang, a public bathhouse, paying the minimal fee each night just to have a roof over her head. She ate convenience store kimbap that was marked down because it was about to expire. She applied for every job she could find, watching doors close in her face over and over again because her Korean was not good enough, because her skin was the wrong color, because she was foreign in a land that did not always welcome foreigners. But Adaeze Okonkwo did not know how to quit. She taught herself Korean by watching dramas late at night in the common area of the bathhouse, repeating phrases until the other patrons complained. She practiced writing characters on napkins, on the back of receipts, on her own hands with pens that were running out of ink. She found a church that had a program for African immigrants, and there she met people who had walked similar paths, who taught her how to navigate a system designed to keep people like her invisible. Eventually, she found work. A small restaurant in Itaewon owned by an elderly woman named Madame Shin, who saw something in Adaeze that reminded her of her own daughter who had died too young. The work was hard, the hours were long, but for the first time since leaving Nigeria, Adaeze could breathe. She rented a tiny gazawan, a room barely big enough to hold a bed, with a shared bathroom down the hall that was never quite clean enough. But it was hers. She put a picture of her mother on the wall, next to a small cross, and every night she prayed for strength to continue and forgiveness for the dreams she had been forced to abandon. Months passed. Her Korean improved. She began to feel something she had not felt since her mother died. Not happiness, not quite, but something adjacent to it. A fragile piece that she carried with her like a candle flame, protecting it from every wind that tried to extinguish it. Then came the morning on the subway. She had been working a double shift at the restaurant and was exhausted beyond reason. Madam Shin had asked her to pick up supplies from a vendor in Gangnam, and so she had dragged herself onto the train during rush hour, surrounded by businessmen in identical suits and students with their faces buried in phones. She found a spot near the door, held onto the hanging strap, and let her eyes close for just a moment. The train stopped suddenly. Some technical issue, a delay. Bodies lurched forward, and Adaeze, already unsteady from exhaustion, lost her grip. She stumbled, her hand shooting out blindly, searching for anything to hold on to. What she found was him. Her palm pressed against the front of his impeccably tailored trousers, her fingers inadvertently grasping at fabric and what lay beneath it. The moment lasted perhaps 2 seconds, but time had a way of stretching in moments of absolute mortification. She jerked back, her face burning with embarrassment, apologies tumbling from her lips in a mixture of Korean and English that probably made no sense. "I am so sorry, forgive me, I did not mean, the train, I fell, I am so sorry." She risked a glance up at the man she had assaulted and felt her apologies die in her throat. He was the most beautiful man she had ever seen, and simultaneously the most terrifying. His features were sharp enough to cut glass, his eyes dark pools that revealed nothing, his presence so commanding that even in the crowded train, there seemed to be a bubble of space around him that no one dared enter. He wore a suit that cost more than she would earn in a year, and a watch that probably cost more than that. But it was his stillness that frightened her most. He did not react. Did not laugh, did not scowl, did not shove her away. He simply looked at her, really looked at her, as if she were a puzzle he had not expected to encounter. "It was an accident," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the rumble of the train. He said nothing. The train doors opened, and Adaeze fled. She did not stop running until she was 3 blocks away, bent over in an alley, gasping for breath and wishing the earth would swallow her whole. She convinced herself she would never see him again. Seoul had nearly 10 million people. The odds of encountering the same stranger twice were astronomical. She told herself to forget it, to add it to the long list of humiliations she had survived and moved past. She was so tragically wrong. 3 weeks later, she was walking to the bus stop after closing the restaurant, exhausted in the way that only double shifts could make you. The streets were quiet, most of the neon signs had been turned off, and the winter wind cut through her inadequate coat like knives made of ice. The black sedan pulled up beside her so smoothly that at first she did not register the danger. The doors opened, men emerged, and before she could scream, a hand covered her mouth and the world went dark. When she woke, she was in the warehouse. With him. With 12 men who looked at her like she was already dead. With a knife at her throat and a question she did not understand. Do it again. What could he possibly mean? Why would a man who clearly commanded armies and wealth beyond imagination hunt down a stranger for an accidental touch in a subway? What kind of monster took such offense at an unintentional brush of a hand that he would orchestrate an abduction? Adaeze stared into his eyes, searching for answers, and found only more questions. And something else. Something she could not name. Something that looked almost like pain. I do not understand, she said, her voice steadier than it had any right to be. "What do you want from me?" Seojun stepped back, and for the first time, his mask cracked. Just a fraction. Just enough for her to see the bleeding beneath. "Neither do I," he said quietly. "That is the problem." He turned to his men and spoke in rapid Korean, too fast for her to follow. They bowed and left, one by one, until only the two of them remained in that vast, cold space. The knife was gone. The threats were gone. But the danger, she sensed, had only just begun. "You are going to stay here tonight," he said. "Tomorrow, I will explain. And then you will have a choice to make." "What choice?" He walked toward the door, pausing at the threshold without looking back. "Whether to save my life or let me die." And then he was gone, and Adaeze was alone with only her fear and her questions and the growing certainty that the accidental touch on that subway had set something in motion that could not be undone. But what she did not yet know, what she could not possibly have understood in that moment, was that she had not just touched a man. She had touched a wound that had been festering for 15 years. And in doing so, she had awakened something that would either heal them both or destroy everything. The room they gave her was not what she expected. After the warehouse, after the threats, after the knife at her throat, Adaeze had prepared herself for a cell, for chains, for conditions designed to break her spirit before they broke her body. Instead, she found herself in what could only be described as a suite in a traditional Korean hanok that had been modernized with exquisite taste. The floors were heated ondol, warming her feet through the elegant wooden boards. A massive bed sat against one wall, covered in blankets that looked softer than anything she had ever touched. Through the windows, she could see a private garden where snow fell gently on carefully manicured pine trees, each one a small masterpiece of horticultural art. There was food waiting for her. Not convenience store kimbap. Not the employee meals she ate at the restaurant. Real food, enough to feed several people, arranged on lacquered trays with the kind of presentation she had only seen in magazines. Her stomach, traitor that it was, growled loudly despite her situation. She did not eat. Not at first. She spent the first hour examining every inch of the room, searching for cameras, for traps, for any explanation that made sense. She found none. The door was unlocked. The windows opened. She could walk out right now, into the snow, into the night, into a city where she knew almost no one and had almost nothing. But she did not. Partly because she had nowhere to go. Partly because something in Seojun's eyes had stopped her cold. That crack in his mask. That moment of something that looked almost human. "What do you want from me?" "Neither do I." That is the problem. Eventually, hunger won. She ate carefully, half expecting the food to be drugged, but tasting nothing except extraordinary quality. The beef melted on her tongue. The rice was perfect. The banchan, the small side dishes, were each a revelation. Whoever cooked this food did so with love, with mastery, with decades of experience. She slept fitfully, waking at every sound, certain that at any moment the door would burst open and the men would return. But morning came quietly, pale winter light filtering through paper screens, and she was still alive, still untouched, still trapped in a mystery she could not unravel. A woman came with more food and fresh clothes. Traditional Korean hanbok, but made from fabrics Adaeze could tell were insanely expensive. The woman did not speak, merely bowed and left, but her eyes were kind. Curious. Perhaps even sympathetic. Adaeze bathed in a bathroom with a heated floor and towels thick as clouds. She dressed in the hanbok, feeling strange in such finery, like a child playing dress-up in her mother's clothes. She waited. Seojun came at noon. He entered without knocking, but paused at the threshold as if asking permission to step into his own home. He had changed from the suit into something more casual, black pants and a black sweater that probably cost as much as everything Adaeze had ever owned combined. Without the formal armor of his business attire, he looked younger. More vulnerable. Still dangerous, but in a different way. "You did not run," he said. "Where would I go? You could have tried. And your men would have caught me. I am not stupid." "No," he agreed, settling into a chair across from where she sat. "You are not. Tell me about yourself." "Why? So you can use it against me? So I can understand who I have brought into my home." Adaeze laughed, a bitter sound that surprised them both. "You kidnapped me. You put a knife to my throat. And now you want to understand me? You are insane." "Perhaps." He did not seem offended. "But you are still here. And that tells me something about you." "What does it tell you?" "That you are either brave or broken. And I have not yet figured out which." The words hit her harder than they should have. Brave or broken. As if those were the only two options. As if she could not be both. "I am Adaeze Okonkwo," she said finally. "From Nigeria. I was almost a doctor. Now I wash dishes in a restaurant. I have no family. No money. No reason to be of any interest to a man like you. And I still do not understand why I am here." Seojun studied her for a long moment. Then he did something unexpected. He rolled up his sleeve, revealing the smooth skin of his inner forearm, and pressed 2 fingers against his wrist. "Feel," he commanded. Adaeze did not move. "I am not going to hurt you," he said, and somehow, impossibly, she believed him. "Feel my pulse." She crossed the room slowly, her heart hammering with each step. She took his wrist in her hands, her dark fingers a stark contrast against his pale skin, and pressed where he had indicated. She felt it immediately. The irregular rhythm. The skipped beats. The flutter and pause that she had learned about in medical school, in the classes she had taken before everything was stolen from her. "Arrhythmia," she said automatically. "Atrial fibrillation, if I had to guess without proper equipment." "You need to see a doctor." "I have seen many doctors," he said. "They all say the same thing. My heart is failing. Has been failing for years. The condition is genetic. My father died of it. His father before him. Every man in my family dies before 50. He pulled his arm back, rolling down his sleeve with movements that were precise and controlled, revealing nothing of what he felt. "I am 42 years old. I have, at most, 8 years left. Probably less. And I had made my peace with that. Had accepted that death was coming and there was nothing I could do but wait." Adaeze sat back, her mind racing. And then the subway. And then the subway. She remembered now. The way he had gone completely still when she touched him. The way he had stared at her as if she was something impossible. At the time, she had assumed it was outrage. Now she understood it was something else entirely. "When your hand touched me," he continued, his voice dropping to something almost like wonder, "something happened. Just for a moment. My heart, it beat normally. For the first time in 20 years, I felt what it was like to have a steady rhythm. Then you pulled away, and it was gone." "That is impossible," Adaeze said. You cannot heal arrhythmia by touching someone. That is not how medicine works. And yet it happened. It could have been coincidence. Stress can affect heart rhythms. The moment I touched you, perhaps the shock reset something temporarily. Vagal nerve stimulation. There are documented cases. My doctors said the same thing. So I tested it. He pulled out his phone, showed her a screen filled with data. Heart rate monitors. Tracking apps. Medical records she could not fully interpret but understood enough to be concerned by. For 3 weeks, I have been monitored continuously. My heart has not beaten normally once. Except for those 2 seconds when you touched me. Adaeze stared at the data, her medical training warring with common sense. What he was suggesting was impossible. Human touch could not cure cardiac conditions. Whatever had happened in that subway was coincidence, placebo, misread data, anything except what he was implying. But the desperate hope in his eyes was real. And she understood, in that moment, why she was really here. Not because he was angry. Not because he wanted revenge. But because a dying man had grasped at the tiniest thread of possibility and could not bring himself to let go. So that is why you said. She could not finish the sentence. Do it again. Yes. He leaned forward, and for the first time, she saw him not as a monster but as a man. Terrified. Hopeful. Human. I needed to know if it was real. If you could save me. I cannot save you. I am not even a real doctor. I never finished my degree. But you know what is wrong with me. You diagnosed me in seconds just from feeling my pulse. Anyone with basic medical training could have done that. And yet the 12 specialists I have seen could not explain what happened when you touched me. They ran tests. They analyzed the data. They have no explanation. But it happened. I was there. I felt it. Adaeze stood, walking to the window, needing distance from the intensity of his gaze. The garden was beautiful, a winter wonderland that seemed to exist in a different reality than the one she had been living in for the past year. Let us say I believe you, she said finally. Let us say that somehow, impossibly, my touch did something to your heart. What do you expect me to do about it? Stay here forever? Become your personal human defibrillator? I have a life. I have a job. I have. She trailed off, realizing how empty the words sounded. What life? Washing dishes for minimum wage? Sleeping in a room the size of a closet? Sending money she could not afford to a country she could never return to? I am not asking you to stay forever, Seojun said. I am asking you for a week. 1 week. Let my doctors study you, study us together. Let them try to understand what happened. And in return, I will give you whatever you want. Whatever I want? Name it. Money. Documents. Education. Passage to any country in the world. Whatever you ask, it is yours. It was a devil's bargain. Adaeze knew that. A man like Seojun did not make offers like this without expecting something in return. But he was also offering her something she had not dared to dream about since losing everything. A chance. I want to finish my medical degree, she said before she could stop herself. Not here. In America. A real university. A real chance to become what I was supposed to be. Done. I am not finished. I want papers. Real papers, not the forged documents I have been living on. I want to be legal, to be real, to never have to hide again. Done. And I want protection. There is a man in Nigeria. Chief Obiora. He believes I owe him a debt that cannot be paid. I want him to never be able to touch me again. For the first time, something cold flickered across Seojun's face. Something predatory. What kind of debt? Adaeze told him. Everything. The loan, the impossible terms, the threats, the reason she had fled. She told him about the entertainment establishments and what Chief Obiora had intended for her. She told him about running, hiding, surviving on nothing because anything was better than becoming a ghost in his empire. When she finished, Seojun was silent for a long moment. Then he spoke, and his voice was ice. Chief Obiora will never threaten you again. By the end of this week, he will have far greater concerns than a debt owed by a woman he will never find. What are you going to do? You do not want to know. He stood, moving toward the door. 1 week, Adaeze Okonkwo. Give me 1 week, and I will give you the world. She should have said no. She should have run. She should have recognized that she was making a deal with a devil whose true nature she could not begin to understand. Instead, she said, 1 week. He nodded and left, and Adaeze was alone again, wondering what she had just agreed to and whether she would live to regret it. Over the next 3 days, she learned things about Kang Seojun that no one was supposed to know. Now, I need to pause here and ask you something important. Think about this moment. Adaeze is standing at a crossroads, making a deal with a dangerous man because she has no other options. Have you ever been so desperate that you took a chance you knew might destroy you? What would you have done in her place? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to know. She learned that he had not always been a monster. Once, he had been a boy who loved music, who played piano with such passion that his teachers wept, who dreamed of concert halls and standing ovations, of translating the pain in his chest into beauty that the world could share. His mother had encouraged him, had sat beside him on the bench during lessons, had told him that his heart condition was not a curse but a gift, that it made him feel everything more deeply and therefore play more beautifully. She died when he was 12. Car accident. Wrong place, wrong time. His father, cold and distant even before his wife's death, had retreated entirely into his empire of shadows. Seojun was raised by housekeepers and tutors, by men who taught him not to feel but to calculate, not to dream but to conquer. The piano sat untouched. The music died. And slowly, over years of violence and betrayal and watching everything soft within him be carved away, Seojun became what his father needed him to be. An heir. A weapon. A king of an underground kingdom that demanded blood as tribute. He took over at 25, when his father's heart finally gave out. By 30, he had expanded the Kang Empire to cover half of Seoul's illegal enterprises. By 35, he was untouchable. By 40, he was emptied out entirely, a man going through the motions of power while waiting for his own defective heart to end the charade. Then he felt a woman's hand on him in a crowded subway, and for 2 seconds, everything changed. Adaeze learned all this not from Seojun himself, but from the woman who brought her food each morning. Her name was Yoonhee, and she had worked for the Kang family for 40 years. She had known Seojun's mother, had watched him grow from a bright, sensitive child into the cold emperor he was today. He is not evil, Yoonhee told her one morning, in careful English she had clearly practiced. He is lost. Has been lost since his mother died. You are the first thing in 30 years that has made him hope. I am not a miracle cure, Adaeze said. Whatever happened on that subway was a fluke. I cannot save him. Yoonhee smiled, a knowing expression that made Adaeze uncomfortable. Perhaps not his heart. But maybe his soul. Maybe both. The medical tests began on the second day. Seojun's doctors filled the house with equipment, with monitors, with machines that beeped and whirred and measured things Adaeze did not understand. They attached sensors to both of them, tracking every heartbeat, every skin conductivity change, every micro-expression. And they tested the touch. First clinical. Adaeze pressing her fingers to Seojun's wrist while doctors watched readouts with barely contained excitement. Nothing. His heart stuttered on, refusing to cooperate with their hypothesis. Then his hand. His arm. His shoulder. Nothing. By the end of the second day, Adaeze was convinced the whole thing had been a delusion. Wishful thinking by a dying man who had invested meaning in a random coincidence. She almost felt sorry for him. Then, on the third morning, it happened again. She was walking through the garden, enjoying a rare moment of peace, when she rounded a corner and nearly collided with him. She stumbled, threw her hands out, and caught herself against his chest, palms flat over his heart. The monitors in the house exploded with alerts. Doctors came running. And when they reviewed the data, they found what Seojun had claimed all along. For the 12 seconds her hands had been on his chest, his heart had beaten with perfect, steady rhythm. Normal sinus rhythm. No flutter. No skip. No dysfunction at all. The instant she pulled away, the arrhythmia returned. "This is impossible," the lead cardiologist said, staring at his screen like it had personally betrayed him. "There is no medical explanation for this." "And yet it happened," Seojun said, and for the first time since she had met him, Adaeze saw him smile. But there was something else in the data. Something the doctors noticed but did not understand. During those 12 seconds, Adaeze's heart rate had spiked dramatically. Her blood pressure had risen. Her stress hormones had flooded her system as if she were in danger. Healing him, it seemed, was hurting her. And neither of them yet realized what that would mean. The days that followed were a fever dream of tests and theories and a growing tension that Adaeze could not name. The doctors came and went, bringing new equipment, new hypotheses, new attempts to quantify something that refused to be understood. They measured brainwaves and skin conductivity and a dozen other metrics that produced data but no answers. Through it all, Seojun watched her. Not with the cold calculation of their first meeting, but with something else. Something that made her skin prickle and her heart race in ways that had nothing to do with medical anomalies. They talked, during the hours between tests. She told him about Nigeria, about her mother, about the dreams she had buried in a shallow grave of circumstance. He told her about the piano, about the music that still lived somewhere inside him even though he had not played in 30 years. They spoke in a mixture of English and Korean, stumbling over words, filling silences with glances that said more than language ever could. On the fourth night, Adaeze made a decision that would change everything. She found the piano. It was in a room that had clearly been untouched for decades, dust covering every surface, sheets draped over furniture like ghosts. But the piano itself was immaculate, clearly maintained by someone who understood its value even if they never intended to play it. Adaeze could not play. Had never learned. But she sat on the bench anyway, letting her fingers rest on the keys without pressing them, imagining the music that had once filled this room when a boy with a broken heart had poured his soul into sound. She did not hear him come in. "My mother sat exactly where you are sitting," Seojun said from the doorway. "During my lessons." She would close her eyes and listen like the music was telling her secrets. Adaeze turned. He was silhouetted against the light from the hallway, his features obscured, but she could hear something in his voice she had not heard before. Vulnerability. Pain. The echo of a child who had lost everything. "Play for me," she said. "I told you. I do not play anymore. Your mother would want you to." He flinched like she had struck him. For a moment, she thought she had gone too far, had trespassed into grief so profound that it could not be touched. But then he crossed the room, his footsteps raising small clouds of dust, and sat beside her on the bench. Their shoulders touched. Their thighs pressed together. The contact was minimal, accidental, but the monitors in the distant medical room would later show that his heart steadied the instant it happened. His fingers hovered over the keys. Trembling. Hesitant. Terrified. Then he began to play. Adaeze did not know classical music. Could not have named the piece if her life depended on it. But she knew beauty when she heard it. She knew pain translated into sound. She knew the kind of grief that could only be expressed through art because words were too small to contain it. He played for over an hour. Sometimes technical and precise, sometimes raw and stumbling, but always with an emotion that made her chest ache. Tears streamed down both their faces, though neither acknowledged them. The dust motes danced in the air like spirits summoned by the music, and the house that had been so cold and empty seemed to breathe again. When he finally stopped, his hands falling from the keys, the silence was profound. "Thank you," he whispered without looking at her. "For what?" "For giving him back to me. The boy I used to be. I thought he was dead." Adaeze took his hand. Not as a test. Not for the doctors to measure. But because it felt right. Because something was happening between them that she did not understand but could not deny. "He was never dead," she said. "Just sleeping." Seojun turned to face her, and what she saw in his eyes made her breath catch. Not cold calculation. Not the masked indifference of a crime lord. But raw, unfiltered longing. The hunger of a man who had been starving for decades and had just remembered what food tasted like. He kissed her. Or she kissed him. Later, neither would remember who moved first. But suddenly they were tangled together, lips and hands and breath, 30 years of his isolation meeting a lifetime of her loneliness in a collision that felt like the birth of stars. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, his heart was beating perfectly. "The doctors will want to analyze this," he said, a hint of dark humor in his voice. Adaeze laughed, surprising herself. "Let them try." That night, she did not return to her room. And in the morning, when the doctors reviewed their data, they found something none of them could explain. During the hours Seojun and Adaeze had spent together, his heart had not merely stabilized. It had strengthened. The arrhythmia that had been slowly killing him for 2 decades had not just paused. It had begun to heal. But there was a cost. Adaeze woke in his bed, momentarily disoriented, then remembered everything. The piano. The kiss. What came after? She turned to find Seojun watching her with an expression of wonder and something that looked almost like fear. "What is it?" she asked. He did not answer. Instead, he called for the doctors. They came quickly, clearly expecting another breakthrough, but their excitement turned to concern when they examined the night's data. Yes, Seojun's heart had improved dramatically. But Adaeze's readings showed something troubling. Her cardiac rhythm, which had been perfectly normal when she arrived, was now showing signs of stress. Mild arrhythmias. Elevated troponin levels. The beginnings of damage that should not have been there. It is as if the lead cardiologist began, then stopped, unwilling to voice what the data seemed to show. As if I am taking his disease into myself, Adaeze finished for him. That is not medically possible. And yet here we are. The room fell silent. Seojun's face had gone pale, all the warmth of the previous night drained away and replaced with horror. "Stop the tests," he said. "But the progress?" "I said stop them." His voice was ice again, the crime lord returning with a vengeance. "She is not to touch me again. Not for any reason. This ends now." Seojun. Did you not hear what they just said? He was on his feet, pacing like a caged animal. "Touching me is killing you. Whatever this is, whatever gift or curse you carry, it comes at a price. A price I will not let you pay. That is not your choice to make. It is when you are in my house, under my protection." Adaeze stood, her body aching in ways that had nothing to do with the previous night's activities. "I walked into this knowingly. I made a deal. 1 week, you said, and then you would give me the world. We are not done yet. The deal is cancelled. You do not get to cancel it." They faced each other across the room, both stubborn, both angry, both terrified for reasons they could not admit. The doctors shifted uncomfortably, clearly wishing they were anywhere else. "Why are you fighting me on this?" Seojun demanded. "I am trying to protect you. I have survived things you cannot imagine. I do not need your protection. You would die for a man you barely know? I would die for a chance to become what I was supposed to be. You offered me medical school. A future. A life. If the price of that is a few months or years off my lifespan, then it is a price worth paying. It is not worth paying to me." The words hung in the air between them. Adaeze stared at him, seeing for the first time what he was really saying. "You care about me," she said slowly. "Not just as a miracle cure. You actually care. That is irrelevant. It is the only thing that is relevant." Seojun turned away, walking to the window, presenting his back to her like armor. "I have destroyed everything I have ever loved. Everyone who gets close to me ends up broken or dead. I will not add you to that list. Then let me make my own choices. Respect me enough to let me take the risk." He was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. 3 more days. That was the original deal. 3 more days, and then you leave. You get your medical school, your papers, your protection. And you never come back. Seojun. Those are my terms. Take them or leave. Adaeze walked to him, ignoring the doctors, ignoring the data, ignoring everything except the man in front of her. She put her hand on his shoulder and felt him stiffen. 3 days, she agreed. "But I am not leaving forever. When I finish medical school, when I am a real doctor, I am coming back. And I am going to find a way to save you without killing myself in the process." He turned, and she saw tears in his eyes. Tears that a man like him should not have been capable of shedding. "You are impossibly stubborn. And you are impossibly dramatic. We make a good pair." For the first time since the doctors had delivered their terrible news, he smiled. Just slightly. Just enough to crack the ice that had reformed around his heart. 3 days, he repeated. Make them count. But the universe, it seemed, had other plans. On the 5th day, the day before she was supposed to leave, the men came. Not Seojun's men. Someone else's. Men with guns and masks and a mission that would shatter everything. Adaeze woke to screaming. Gunshots. The sound of glass breaking and bodies falling. She was out of bed and running before conscious thought caught up with instinct, following the sounds of combat through halls that had become familiar, praying she was not too late. She found Seojun in the main room, surrounded by bodies. His men were down, some dead, some dying. He stood in the center of the carnage, bleeding from a wound in his side, facing 3 remaining attackers with nothing but a knife and the cold fury of a man who had nothing left to lose. "Well, well," said the leader of the attackers, a man whose face was hidden behind a mask but whose voice dripped with mockery. "The great Kang Seojun. Not so invincible now, are you? Who sent you? Does it matter? You made enemies, old friend. Too many to count. Tonight, we collect." One of the attackers raised his gun, aimed at Seojun's head. The shot would not miss. Adaeze moved without thinking. She hurled herself across the room, crashing into Seojun, knocking him aside just as the gun fired. The bullet meant for his skull grazed her arm instead, burning a path through flesh, but she barely felt it. They hit the ground together, tangled, her hands pressed against his chest in an echo of their first real connection. And in that moment of contact, of desperation, of something neither of them understood, power erupted. It was not a gentle thing, not the slow healing they had documented. It was explosive, visible, undeniable. Light poured from where their skin touched, blinding white, forcing the attackers to shield their eyes. Seojun gasped as something fundamental shifted inside him. Adaeze screamed as something was torn away. The light lasted perhaps 10 seconds. When it faded, 3 things had changed. Seojun's wound had healed. Not just closed, but healed completely, the flesh unmarked as if it had never been damaged. The attackers were unconscious, collapsed on the floor without visible injury, as if they had simply been switched off. And Adaeze was bleeding from her eyes. "What?" Seojun caught her as she collapsed, cradling her against his chest. "What did you do?" "I do not know," she whispered. "But I think I just saved your life." Again. Then she lost consciousness, and the world went dark. She woke in a hospital. Not the house, not the hammock with its heated floors and careful beauty. A real hospital, with machines beeping and tubes feeding into her arms and doctors in white coats speaking Korean too fast for her to follow. Seojun was there. Of course he was. Sitting beside her bed, his face haggard, his eyes red from what looked like days without sleep. "How long?" she croaked. 4 days. Your body was shutting down. Multiple organ stress. The doctors could not explain it. "And you?" He took her hand, pressed it to his chest. And she felt it. A heartbeat. Strong. Steady. Perfect. "They ran every test," he said. "My heart is healed. Completely. As if I never had arrhythmia at all. You cured me." Adaeze closed her eyes. "Then it was worth it." "It was not worth it if you die." "I am not dying. I am just resting." "Adaeze. Let me sleep. We can argue about the cost of miracles when I wake up." She slept. And dreamed of her mother, who smiled at her and said, "You have his gift now. Use it wisely." When she woke again, she understood. Whatever had passed between them that night had not just healed Seojun. It had transferred something to her. Some ability, some power, some connection to healing that she did not understand but could feel burning inside her like a second heartbeat. She could save people now. Really save them. In ways that went beyond medicine. But like all gifts, it came with a price. Recovery was slow. Adaeze spent 2 weeks in the hospital while her body learned to accommodate whatever had taken root inside her. The doctors could not explain her symptoms, could not understand why her vitals would spike and normalize seemingly at random, could not comprehend the strange energy they sometimes felt when they touched her. Seojun never left her side. Not once. He slept in the chair beside her bed, ate when the nurses forced him to, conducted whatever business absolutely required his attention through cryptic phone calls in the hallway. His empire could run itself for a few weeks. She could not. They talked during the long hours of recovery. Real talk, not the careful negotiations of their first days together. She told him about Lagos, about the smell of the ocean mixing with exhaust fumes, about the way her mother's laugh could fill a room and make everyone in it feel safe. He told her about his mother's funeral, how he had not been allowed to cry, how his father had gripped his shoulder so hard it bruised and whispered that men like them did not show weakness. "You were 12, Adaeze said. You were allowed to be weak. Not in my world. Then your world was wrong." He did not argue. Perhaps he was finally ready to admit that she was right. On the day she was discharged, he took her back to the hammock, but nothing was the same. The attack had exposed vulnerabilities in his organization that could not be ignored. The men who had come for him had been sent by a rival named Kwon Tae-jin, a crime lord from Busan who had been moving against the Kang Empire for years and had finally seen an opportunity. "War is coming," Seojun told her that night, as they sat in the garden watching the first spring flowers begin to bloom. "There is no avoiding it now. What will you do?" "What I have always done. Protect what is mine. Destroy what threatens it." "And me?" He turned to look at her, and in his eyes she saw something that had not been there before. Fear. Real, human fear. "You should leave. Go to America, as we planned. Start your new life. Forget you ever knew me. Is that what you want?" "It is what is best for you." "That is not what I asked." He was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotions he had never learned to express. "No. It is not what I want. What I want is impossible. What I want is for you to stay. To be with me. To build something together that is not built on blood and fear. But that is not a life I can offer you. Not now. Perhaps not ever." Adaeze took his hand. Felt the steady beat of his healed heart beneath his skin. "Then change it. You do not understand what you are asking." "I understand exactly what I am asking. You have power. You have resources. You have, against all odds, a conscience. Use them. Not to destroy Kwon Tae-jin, but to become something better. Leave the empire behind. Build something new. And let my enemies win? Let everything my family built for 3 generations crumble? What did your family build? Fear? Suffering? Death? Is that a legacy worth protecting? It is all I know." "Then learn something new. You are not too old. And you are not alone anymore." He stared at her as if she had grown a second head. As if no one had ever suggested to him that there was an alternative to the path he had been walking his entire life. You would stay? Even knowing what I am? What I have done? I know what you are, Adaeze said. You are a man who played piano until his heart broke and then forgot how to feel anything. You are a man who kidnapped a stranger because she gave him 2 seconds of hope. You are a man who almost let me die trying to save you and then sat by my bed for 2 weeks because he could not bear to lose me. You are not a monster. You are a man who has been playing a monster for so long that he forgot it was a costume. Something broke in his face. The last remnants of the mask he had worn since his mother died. And what emerged from the wreckage was not the crime lord, not the emperor of shadows, but the boy who had once made his mother weep with the beauty of his music. Help me, he whispered. Help me be better. I will. But first, you have to let go of what you have been. And if Kwon Tae-jin comes for us? Then we face him together. But not as criminals. Not as monsters. As something else. Something new. It was insane. It was impossible. It was the kind of naive hope that got people killed in the world Seojun had inhabited for 20 years. He agreed anyway. Over the next 3 months, things changed. Slowly at first, then with gathering momentum. Seojun began the delicate process of dismantling his empire, piece by piece. The illegal operations were sold or shut down, the money laundering networks were dissolved, the men who had killed for him were offered choices. Some took legitimate jobs within the legitimate businesses the Kang family also owned. Others simply disappeared, taking their skills to other organizations. Kwon Tae-jin noticed. Of course he noticed. He sent messengers, threats, offers to negotiate. Seojun ignored them all. He will not let you walk away, his lieutenants warned. He will see your transformation as weakness. He will attack. Then let him attack, Seojun replied. I am done playing by the old rules. Adaeze, meanwhile, began to understand what had happened to her that night when the light had poured from their joined hands. The power that had transferred to her was not just for Seojun. It was something larger, something that responded to her will and her touch. She discovered it by accident, when one of Seojun's former employees brought his sick daughter to the house, begging for money for medical treatment. The girl was dying of leukemia. Stage 4. Beyond help. Adaeze touched her without thinking. Just a hand on the forehead, a gesture of comfort. And she felt the power surge through her, felt it flowing into the child, felt something shifting in ways she could not see but somehow knew. The girl's fever broke that night. By morning, her blood counts had improved. By the end of the week, her doctors were using words like remission and miracle and impossible. The power came with a cost. Every healing left Adaeze weakened, sometimes for hours, sometimes for days. She learned to pace herself, to choose carefully who she helped, to accept that she could not save everyone. But she could save some. And that was more than she had ever dreamed possible. Word spread, as it always does. The Kang heir who had turned his back on crime. The African woman who could heal with a touch. Together, they became something Seoul had never seen before. Not criminals. Not saints. Something in between. Something new. Kwon Tae-jin came for them in summer, when the city was thick with heat and the streets were crowded with tourists and students on break. He came with all the force he could muster, 100 men, armed and ruthless, determined to crush this new threat before it could undermine everything he had built. He expected to find weakness. He found something else entirely. Seojun had not spent the past months only dismantling his empire. He had also been building something new. A network of former enemies turned allies, of police officers who were tired of being in the pockets of criminals, of business leaders who wanted to break free from the parasites that had been feeding on them for decades. A resistance that grew in the shadows of the underworld and emerged, fully formed, on the night Gwon Taejin attacked. The battle was brief. Taejin's men found themselves outmaneuvered, outgunned, and ultimately outmatched. By midnight, it was over. Taejin himself was in custody, his organization shattered, his threats rendered meaningless. And Seojun stood in the ruins of the empire he had destroyed, holding the hand of the woman who had taught him how to hope again. "What now?" he asked. "Now," Adaeze said, "we start building something worth living for." But even as they began their new life, a shadow from Adaeze's past was preparing to strike. Chief Obiora had not forgotten her. Had not forgiven her for running. And now that she had made herself visible, had become someone of importance, he saw an opportunity for revenge. He came to Seoul 3 weeks after Taejin's defeat. He came with money, with connections, with a hunger for what he believed was rightfully his. And he came with a secret that would shake everything Adaeze thought she knew about herself. The confrontation happened in the house where Seojun's mother had once listened to him play piano. Chief Obiora bribed his way past security, bought the silence of a guard who still harbored resentment from the old days, and found Adaeze alone in the garden. "Little bird," he said, stepping out of the shadows. "You flew so far from home. But I always find what is mine." Adaeze turned, and for a moment, she was 17 again. Terrified. Powerless. Trapped. Then she remembered who she had become. "I am not yours," she said, her voice steady. "I never was. You owe me a debt. That makes you mine." The debt was a lie. The contract was illegal. And the man I love has made sure you will never hurt another woman again. Obiora laughed, a sound that had no humor in it. "The Korean? He cannot touch me here. I have connections. Protection. I am untouchable. You were untouchable. Before tonight." Obiora's smile flickered. "What are you talking about?" Adaeze pulled out her phone. Showed him the screen. "Your operations in Nigeria. The clubs, the trafficking routes, the politicians you bought. All of it. Documented. Recorded. And as of 1 hour ago, delivered to every major news outlet in West Africa and every law enforcement agency that is not on your payroll." Obiora's face went pale. "That is impossible." Seojun's resources were considerable. His network was vast. And he was very, very thorough. "You cannot do this to me. I will destroy you. I will. You will do nothing. Because in approximately 3 minutes, the Korean authorities will arrive to arrest you for illegal entry and suspected human trafficking. Your diplomatic contacts have already been warned to disavow any knowledge of you. And your partners back home are already scrambling to distance themselves from a sinking ship." Obiora's eyes bulged. He reached for her, whether to grab her or hit her or plead with her, she would never know. Because at that moment, Seojun emerged from the house with a dozen men behind him. "You should not have come here," Seojun said, his voice the cold blade it had been when Adaeze first met him. "You should not have threatened what is mine. She is mine. She is her own. And she has chosen to be with me. You have no claim. You have no power. You have nothing." The sirens arrived 30 seconds later. Obiora was dragged away, screaming threats that no one believed anymore. And Adaeze stood in the garden, watching the last ghost of her past disappear into the night. "It is over," Seojun said, putting his arms around her. "He will never hurt you again." "I know." She leaned into him, exhausted and relieved, and something else. Free. For the first time in her life, truly free. "Thank you. You saved my life first. This was just repayment." "Is that all it was?" He turned her to face him, cupping her face in his hands. "No. It was not just repayment. It was love. It is love. You are the first thing I have loved since my mother died. And I will spend the rest of my life protecting you, if you will let me. I thought you said touching me was dangerous. Living is dangerous. Loving is dangerous. You taught me that some things are worth the risk." She kissed him then, under the stars, in the garden where his mother had once watched him play. And for the first time since she left Nigeria, Adaeze felt like she was home. But their story was not over. There was still one more chapter to write. 5 years passed. 5 years of change, of growth, of a love that deepened with every season. Seoul transformed around them as they transformed within it. The Kang Foundation rose from the ashes of the old empire, a legitimate organization dedicated to helping those who had been forgotten by society. Immigrants struggling to find their footing. Victims of trafficking learning to reclaim their lives. Young people from the slums who needed someone to believe in them. Adaeze completed her medical degree, not in America as originally planned, but in Seoul. The university had offered her a scholarship after word of her abilities spread, and she had accepted on one condition. She would study traditional medicine alongside Western practices, learning to understand the gift that had awakened within her and how to use it responsibly. She never healed indiscriminately. She had learned, through painful experience, that her power came at a cost. Every life she saved took something from her own vitality. Not enough to kill her, not if she was careful, but enough to remind her that miracles were never free. She healed children when the alternatives were too terrible to contemplate. She healed the elderly who had been forgotten by a system that had no use for them. She healed, carefully and sparingly, those whose lives would ripple outward to help others. And always, always, she came home to Seojun. Their relationship was not without challenges. He struggled with his past, with the weight of the things he had done before she came into his life. Some nights he woke screaming from nightmares, and all she could do was hold him until the trembling stopped. Some days the old coldness crept back in, and she had to remind him that he was not the man he used to be. But they faced it together. That was the key. Whatever came, they faced it together. The wedding was small. Just the two of them, Yoonhee, a handful of trusted friends, and a traditional ceremony that blended Korean custom with Nigerian tradition. Adaeze wore white silk embroidered with gold, a dress that had taken 3 months to create. Seojun wore the traditional hanbok his mother had once dreamed of seeing him in. They exchanged vows in 2 languages. Promises that transcended words. Commitments that would last beyond this life and into whatever came next. The reception was larger. Impossible to keep entirely quiet, given who Seojun had been and who they were becoming. Dignitaries came, politicians, former enemies who had become reluctant allies. But the guests who mattered most were the people they had helped over the years. The trafficking survivors who had become advocates. The immigrants who had become entrepreneurs. The children who had been given second chances. Adaeze looked out at the crowd and saw, not a room full of strangers, but a family. A strange, improbable, beautiful family forged from pain and hope and stubborn refusal to accept that some things were impossible. Happy? Seojun asked, coming up behind her. Terrified, she admitted. But yes. Happy. Good. Because there is something I need to tell you. Her heart stuttered. Even now, even after everything, those words still triggered fear. What is it? I spoke with the doctors today. About my heart. And? It is still perfect. No sign of the arrhythmia returning. They cannot explain it. They have given up trying. Relief flooded through her. That is wonderful. There is more. He took her hands, his eyes shining with something she had never seen before. They also did some tests. Blood work. Routine screening. And they found something unexpected. Seojun, you are scaring me. I am not sick. That is not what I mean. But there was something in my blood. Something that should not have been there. They traced it back to the night you saved me. The night the light came from your hands. Adaeze's throat tightened. What did they find? Your DNA. In my blood. Not much, just trace amounts, but it is there. We are connected, Adaeze. Not just emotionally, not just spiritually, but physically. Whatever happened that night, it bound us together on a level that science cannot explain. She stared at him, processing what he was saying. We are linked? It appears so. The doctors think that is why my heart has stayed healed. Because as long as you are alive, as long as we are together, the cure remains in my system. And if I die? He held her tighter, as if the act of holding her could rewrite fate itself. But that is not happening, Seojun said, his voice steady now, resolved in a way it had never been before. Not in this lifetime. Not in any lifetime I can fight for. Adaeze exhaled slowly, the weight of everything pressing down on her chest. We'll figure it out. We always do. 5 years had taught them that survival was not a miracle. It was a choice, made over and over again, even when the cost was terrifying. That night, long after the guests had left and the house had gone quiet, Adaeze lay awake beside him, listening to the sound of his heart. Strong. Steady. Alive. She pressed her palm lightly against his chest, not to heal, not to test, but simply to feel. And something stirred inside her. Not pain. Not the familiar drain that followed healing. But resistance. A warmth that pushed back. For the first time since the night of the light, her body did not feel like it was giving something away. It felt like it was adapting. She sat up slowly. What is it? Seojun murmured, half asleep. I think, she hesitated, afraid to hope too loudly. I think whatever connected us is changing. He opened his eyes fully now. Changing how? I don't feel the cost. Not like before. She placed his hand over her own heart. It's like my body learned. Like it stopped sacrificing and started sharing. They stared at each other in the dark, the implications unfolding silently between them. Morning brought confirmation. The doctors ran tests. Again. And again. Blood work. Imaging. Neural scans. The results were impossible in a different way now. Adaeze's body had stabilized. Her heart was stronger than it had ever been. Her cellular markers showed regeneration patterns no human should possess, but they were no longer consuming her. The imbalance was gone. She's not losing anything anymore, the lead physician said, baffled. If anything, she's gaining. And me? Seojun asked. Your system remains stable. Permanently. Adaeze sat back, overwhelmed. So I'm not dying for every life I save anymore, she whispered. No, the doctor said. You're evolving. That was the moment Adaeze understood. The gift had never been meant to kill her. It had been meant to change her. And it had needed love to complete the transformation. That realization came with a question she could no longer ignore. If she could heal without dying. If she could protect without losing herself. If she could finally choose freely. What kind of future would she build? She found Seojun in the old piano room that evening. He was playing again. Not for grief this time. Not for loss. But for joy. The melody was lighter, hopeful, alive in a way that made her throat tighten. She stood in the doorway, watching the man who had once ruled through fear now create beauty with his hands. When he finished, he turned to her and smiled. I've been offered a seat on the Foundation's international board, she said. He rose slowly. That means traveling. Yes. For how long? For as long as it takes. He studied her face carefully. And what do you want? She stepped closer. Took his hands. I want you with me. Not as a king. Not as a protector. Just as my husband. He laughed softly, emotion cracking through. You're asking a lot. I know. He kissed her forehead. Then yes. Wherever you go, I go. That night, for the first time since Lagos, Adaeze slept without fear. But peace has a way of drawing out those who resent it. 3 weeks later, the threats began. Anonymous messages. Financial sabotage attempts against the Foundation. Whispers in the underworld of a coalition forming, remnants of the old crime families, men who believed Seojun's transformation had humiliated them. And at the center of it all was a name they had hoped never to hear again. Kwon Tae-jin had allies. And he was not finished. The attack came quietly. No guns. No explosions. Just signatures. Frozen accounts. Blocked shipments of medical supplies. Political pressure against the Foundation's clinics in underserved districts. A slow suffocation designed to force Seojun back into the shadows he had abandoned. They want to make you choose, Adaeze said, reviewing the reports late into the night. Your old power, or everything we've built. Seojun leaned back, eyes dark but calm. They misunderstand me. How so? They think I fear losing influence. He looked at her. What I fear is losing you. She reached for his hand. Then don't play their game. I won't, he said. I'll end it. The final confrontation wasn't fought in blood. It was fought in daylight. Seojun called a press conference. Every major network attended. He stood before cameras not as a criminal, not as a fugitive king, but as a man who had nothing left to hide. I was once Kang Seojun, he said. A man who ruled through fear. A man who believed power was taken, not earned. The room was silent. I am here to confess. To expose. And to dismantle what remains of that world. Names followed. Documents. Evidence. Bank trails. Political bribes. Trafficking routes. Men far more powerful than Gwon Tae-jin watched their empires collapse in real time. And when Tae-jin himself attempted to flee the country, he was arrested at the airport, intercepted by warrants issued across 3 jurisdictions. Justice, at last, did what violence never could. Later that night, as Seoul buzzed with the shockwaves of the revelations, Adaeze stood on the rooftop of the foundation's main building, overlooking a city that no longer felt hostile. Seojun joined her, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "It's over," he said. She nodded. "It finally is." "Do you ever think about that day?" he asked quietly. "The subway." She smiled. "Every time I ride the train." "An accident," he said. "No," she corrected gently. "A collision." He turned her to face him. "You changed my fate. You changed mine too." She rested her head against his chest, listening to the heartbeat that once marked the countdown to his death and now measured the rhythm of a shared life. "Before this story ends, I want to ask you something, not as a viewer, but as a human being. Do you believe people can truly change when love meets courage? Or do you think the past always wins? Tell me what you think in the comments." Months later, Adaeze stood in a clinic on the outskirts of a city that could have been anywhere in the world. A young boy lay on the bed, his breathing shallow, his mother shaking with fear. Adaeze took his hand. She felt the familiar warmth rise, steady, controlled, no pain following. The boy's breathing evened. His eyes opened. His mother collapsed in tears. Seojun watched from the doorway, pride and awe etched into every line of his face. That night, as they walked home under unfamiliar stars, Adaeze laughed softly. "What?" She squeezed his hand. "You once said I touched your manhood accidentally in public." He smirked. "I remember." "And asked me to do it again." He leaned in, voice low. "Still would." She laughed, shaking her head. "You're impossible." "And alive," he said. "Because of you." They stopped walking. He turned serious. "Whatever you heal, whatever you become, never forget this." "What?" "You didn't save me by touching my body." His hand pressed over his heart. "You saved me by reminding me how to live." They kissed, not urgently, not desperately, but with the quiet certainty of 2 people who had survived the impossible. If this story moved you, if it stayed with you longer than you expected, if you believe love can rewrite destiny, don't keep it to yourself. Subscribe. Share it with someone who needs hope. Because stories like this only live if we carry them forward. And somewhere out there, someone is still standing on a crowded train, about to collide with the moment that changes everything.